So we have a royal walking off a cliff. We have details on the number of horses you can expect to see for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, the latest on the papers that Prince Andrew has or has not been served, and what the royal family have been saying about Prince Philip since his death. Welcome to the Royal Rota from ITV, your weekly podcast on YouTube and on your podcast platform. I'm here. Lizzie's here, and I've just been looking at my list. When are we going to do a podcast and say not much happened? We always start this podcast with, it's been a busy week in Royal Land.
It's been a busy week in Royal Land.
Well, it kind of has, yeah.
It's been another busy week, yes.
Yes. Also we spoke to Dame Judi Dench. People might know her as the James Bond's boss and many other things. In fact, she's played Queen Victoria, she's played Queen Elizabeth I. Never has she played Queen Elizabeth II, and we did ask her if she was going to. Apparently not, or no great plans. We'll tell you why we spoke to her. It's all about trees and also about the Platinum Jubilee. So a few things on the Platinum Jubilee this week. Oh, and there's been a royal baby.
And there's been a royal baby.
Blimey.
Always some happy news, and particularly for Prince Andrew, who hasn't had the easiest of times recently. And we will update you on the latest in the case between him and Virginia Giuffre.
The observant ones amongst you will have noticed that when Buckingham Palace put out the statement about the arrival of this little baby, which anyone will agree is very good news, and congratulations to Princess Beatrice and her husband Edo, there wasn't any huge dwelling on the grandparents in there. The name Prince Andrew or Duke of York didn't appear. It just said the word grandparents are very happy. No. Yes. This is the Queen's, what, 12th?
12th, great.
12th, GG.
Great-grandchild.
GG.
It's getting tricky to keep up with them all, to be honest.
Right, do you want me to time you guys? I thought it was quite successful last week, timing you on your Robinson's Royal Rundown. And you were very good.
Thanks.
So you have
I think I'll be under this week because it's a slightly shorter list, but let's see how we go.
Have a minute starting from now.
So, as you say, the return of the Chelsea Flower Show, which...
Shower Flow,
which happened virtually last year because of the pandemic, and it is the first time that it has been held in the autumn, and we had members of the royal family out and about. We heard details of the launch of a Platinum Jubilee celebration next May, which will be held at the Royal Windsor Horse Show. Prince Andrew was finally served the court papers in the case brought to him by Virginia Giuffre. Princess Beatrice and her husband Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi have had a baby girl. The Duchess of Cambridge had a day out to Cumbria, and the royal family remembered Prince Philip in a new BBC documentary that aired last night, and where they all paid tribute to him.
Now, if I was programme editing,
you'd be 10 seconds under. Yes.
So not as good as last week. Nevertheless, you could have padded one of those out to get to the minute. You know?
I could have.
OK, a lot to learn. We should keep training you every week. Where shall we start? Shall we start with the fact that we went to the Chelsea Flower Show? Now, the Chelsea Flower Show happens every spring. What on earth is it doing in autumn, you might hear you say? Well, or the fall. I always have to take care of our American viewers and listeners because we call autumn, you call it the fall. Fall. Anyway, we were at the Chelsea Flower Show. It's the first time it's happened in autumn. The reason why, well, of course, pandemic pushed it from spring to autumn. It didn't even happen last year. Members of the royal family went, but there was no Queen this year because the Queen's in Balmoral. The Queen is in Balmoral.
She rarely misses a Chelsea Flower Show, and we were trying to work out, weren't we, when she last missed it, and we think it was 2005. But there has only been a handful, Canada, I think, but there have only been a handful of occasions where she hasn't been there.
Yes, so
she deployed the troops instead.
No disrespect to any of the royals who went, but it was a lower tier order of members of the royal family. Now, I don't say that disrespectfully. I mean, they are basically, look at the list.
It's true. If you look to the list,
the highest one up there was Prince Edward, the Earl of Wessex, and Sophie Wessex, the Countess. Princess Royal was there. She's the next most senior, and her husband.
No.
He was there.
No.
I saw him.
Did you?
Princess Royal's husband, yeah.
Tim Lawrence was there, was he? Yeah. Oh, I didn't see him.
Well, OK.
I was hanging around with the Earl and Countess.
You're giving our viewers an inaccurate portrayal of what happened.
He wasn't on the list.
Well, he was there. And then there was, I tell you what, I was actually reasonably excited because these are the kind of royals that you occasionally read about in the Sunday papers for sometimes doing things or having claims made about them, shall we say. And in that, I mean Prince Michael of Kent and Princess Michael of Kent. I've never actually seen them at an event before. I was saying to some of the Buckingham Palace royal aides, I'm quite excited about seeing Prince Michael of Kent and the Duke of Gloucester. I mean, all these other royals that Princess Alexandra?
Yep.
Now, I always just say Queen's cousin because I'm never quite sure where they fit, but they do work on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen.
They do.
And so they did at the Chelsea Flower Show.
Yep, they were deployed to the Chelsea Flower Show and they all got the chance to see what is called the Queen's Green Canopy Garden, among other things.
That's why we were there.
And that's why we were there.
Yes, indeed. The Queen's Green Canopy, so a project for the Jubilee next year. You must, of course, be aware that it's the Platinum Jubilee next year, 70 years of her reign, which actually began on the 6th of February. 1952, when King George VI died. We hit that milestone next year. Britain has never had a monarch who has reigned for 70 years. No. The Platinum Jubilee in itself is quite unique. One of the things they want you to do for the Platinum Jubilee is plant a tree.
For the Jubilee.
Plant a tree for the Jubilee.
Or the treebilee, as Prince Charles said.
Treebilee.
The treebilee.
I didn't like that very much. No, I wasn't impressed with that. But someone obviously came up with a little alliteration of plant a tree for the Jubilee. So
we heard about plant a tree for the Jubilee earlier this year, but they didn't want people to start planting their trees until October because...
So they still don't want you to plant your tree?
No.
Not yet.
No, just hang fire a little bit longer.
Stick your tree in the ground from October until March or something.
Yeah. So
in the UK.
They're trying to encourage...
You're watching this in another part of the world. I'm sure your tree planting season is entirely different.
They're trying to encourage people to plant trees at the right time in the right place.
The right tree in the right place. So don't go and find a tree that's like native to Papua New Guinea and stick that in the ground because that wouldn't be very good. You find a tree that's native to the UK, stick it in the ground. They haven't really got a target of how many trees they want in the ground, but they did say there were 22 million households with gardens in the UK. So if every single one of them stuck a tree in the ground, that's quite a lot of trees.
Yeah, that would be...
Yeah. I'd say that would be an achievement.
A huge achievement, even if half that.
Yes.
Planted trees.
So why then did we speak to Dame Judi Dench, the celebrated actor of stage and screen, and someone who has portrayed a queen, a monarch herself? So
Dame Judi Dench is an ambassador for the Queen's Green Canopy.
She was once Queen Victoria and Abdul.
She was, yes. And she said that she had...
I've watched that. I think I've watched bits of it. What's the other one about the Queen Victoria's other Mr. Brown, John Brown?
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one.
No. OK, we've got some watching to do. I'm sure it's on Netflix somewhere. Or maybe not.
But Dame Judi Dench said she had two great loves in life.
Yes, two great loves in life. So should we hear from Dame Judi Dench? This is part of the interview that we did with her at the Chelsea Flower Show on Monday. Two great loves in life, what are they? You're about to find out. When you were asked to get involved in this, the Queen's Green Canopy, I suppose you didn't have to think too hard about saying yes.
No, I think I said yes before they got to the end of the sentence. I think so.
And that's how much you love trees?
Yes, it is. It is. I have two passions in my life, William Shakespeare and trees. If you can only plant a little tree, a fruit tree, anything, plant it in your garden or somewhere you know. Thank goodness we can do something which isn't just talking about climate change, but doing something to help it.
While you were watching Dame Judi Dench, we just had to have a discussion because you might have heard that there was a debate about whether Princess Anne's husband, Timothy Lawrence, was there or not. Who won?
So what's next on the list?
I won.
Chris
I literally
won.
had to go into my phone and find some video that I took on Monday.
Because I didn't believe him.
And there he is. I mean, anyone, let's show it to that camera. See, that's on my phone, and that is Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, husband of...
The Princess Royal.
Who was at...
The Chelsea Flower Show, yes.
Right, should we move on?
Let's move on. I was busy with the Earl and Countess of Wessex, so...
Obviously so busy you don't even know which royals were not at Chelsea Flower Show. Right, so funny enough, someone else we spoke to as well there, Floella Benjamin. Now, Floella Benjamin, if you don't know her, is now Baroness Benjamin. She's in the House of Lords. She, famous TV presenter and advocate of children, and spoke to us actually about, this is an opportunity, the Queen's Green Canopy, for children in schools and in some also diverse communities who might feel a bit disconnected from the royal family at times to get involved in a very active way in planting trees. So this is what Floella Benjamin said to us.
Don't make excuses. Don't say that's not for me. It's for you. It's for every single person. That's why we want to get as many schools involved as possible for people who live in the tower blocks.
So we've just been telling you that the Platinum Jubilee is happening next year. We've also got news of something else that's happening next year. We now know that there's going to be a show at the Windsor Horse Show. So before the main Platinum weekend, and there's a sort of public holiday, a 4-day weekend, isn't there, that's been arranged in May or June? I forget which June. But before all that happens, on the 15th of May, at the culmination of the Windsor Horse Show, there's going to be a 2-hour live show on ITV, which we got some of the details, not many, but some of the details this week.
So every evening across the Windsor Horse Show, from the 12th to the 15th of May next year, there will be a special show in celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And as you say, on the evening of the 15th, that show will be broadcast live on ITV, and you can expect, I think they said there'd be 500 horses, 1,000 performers, some famous faces. I think we're expecting the likes of Dame Helen Mirren and Stephen Fry to take part. Helen Mirren, who has played the Queen.
The Diana film.
The Queen.
The Queen. In the Diana film, she played the Queen.
Yeah.
Yes. We are on the same page, honestly. And yes, so she might be there as other actors and actresses to be signed up and notified in due course. And one imagines that most of the royal family will be there as well. I mean,
I think we'll see them.
How much horses mean to the Queen, so if they know what's good for them, they'll be there.
So this is the Queen's, obviously, one of the Queen's greatest passions is horses, and she's being kept fully in the loop, we understand, about plans, and they said that, if she did have any thoughts on what they'd like her to include, that they would oblige.
They would be expressed, yes, indeed. So some details of the Windsor Horse Show. So we trotted into the mews of Buckingham Palace. There were the King's Troop and the Household Cavalry they had lined up in the Royal Mews, along with a press conference that they put on there as well to announce this big extravaganza. But more details to come in due course. But that should be quite something.
It was quite amazing, wasn't it? We sat in the riding school in the Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace for this press conference, and there were 2 of the state carriages and an orchestra playing. It was
Irish state coach and the...
They thought it was the Australian, didn't they?
Yeah, I forget now. Yes, Australian state coach, as you do.
As you do. I mean, I haven't been to a press conference with state coaches before.
No. We didn't get a ride in them, though, did we?
No, we didn't. We didn't.
But,
and we're told that the production will take a gallop through history from the Elizabeth I era right through until the present day.
So an Elizabethan extravaganza. So from one Elizabethan era to another, and that will be part of what the performers will do on stage, in amongst all the horses, and the military, of course, involved as well. So that's everything we know about the Windsor Horse Show. Why did a member of the royal family walk off a cliff this week, I hear you ask? We're not talking about Prince Andrew. We are talking about...
the Duchess of Cambridge.
Yes, we are.
She had an away day to Cumbria this week.
She did. Cumbria, in the top northwestern corner of England, where the famous Lake District is, and she was on Lake Windermere. A couple of stories to tell you, actually. One where she met some RAF air cadets, didn't she, and went mountain biking with them. Have a look at this video of her on her bike.
They did some abseiling.
So this is why I say she threw herself off the edge of a cliff, kind of. Went down the cliff with a white hard hat on her head.
She did. I thought these were great pictures.
They were, weren't they? You don't
really
see
great pictures.
A royal leaning
and it's all part of the Duchess's work about the outdoors, which she believes plays a pivotal role in the health and happiness of children. But it was nice to see her out and about. We know she's active and likes getting involved in things.
Yeah.
So they were great pictures, but I thought the better story was her second engagement of the day.
Yes, because she opened a new adventure centre for the Air Cadets, didn't she? And then she, on a little boat, and you can see some pictures of her. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to this on your podcast, well, you have to go find the pictures elsewhere. Or join us on YouTube. You're always welcome. You just put in ITV Royal Rota into YouTube, and guess what you get? ITV Royal Rota. It's quite amazing how that search engine works, isn't it?
Incredible.
It's incredible. Anyway, if you're listening and you want to see these pictures, you know where to go. If you're watching, you're probably seeing them right now. These are pictures of Kate on a boat, and she's in Lake Windermere. Now, the very serious part of this story is that she actually met a couple of Holocaust survivors who were called the Windermere Children. There was a group of 300 of them who, after miraculously surviving the concentration camps and the ghettos of occupied Nazi Europe, they were brought to Windermere as the start of what I suppose you can only call the beginning of their recovery process, which I'm sure is still with them to this day. In fact, they said as much, didn't they? But these children would spend time on the lakes, on climbing up the mountains, going to the cinema, having as near normal a life as they could after the horrors of what they had experienced during the Second World War. And Kate met them and spoke to them, and I thought it was a very powerful moment, and a reminder, of course, that we don't have many survivors of the Holocaust who are still with us, but important that we share their stories when we can.
Yeah, she met two of those survivors, as you say, Eric Hirsch and Ike Alterman, who are both 93 now, and they took a boat trip together with the Duchess across Lake Windermere, which is kind of in the heart of the Lake District. It's beautiful. Really beautiful. And they spent time talking to her about how they had found their time in Cumbria when they had come over, and were pointing out places that they remembered. But one of them, Ike, described it as sort of arriving in paradise after living in hell.
Quite so. And this is what they said to our cameras who were there after they met the Duchess.
Arrived here, as we are, I think a lot of the boys will come out with the same saying, out of hell into paradise. We couldn't believe that we would be alive.
I went swimming every third day. We went in the mountains, climbing in the mountains and so on, and went to the cinema in Windermere for sixpence. Went in, and it was wonderful life for 6 months here.
And after she met, actually, Kate put on it was in the first person, wasn't it? So she must have written this tweet, or at least dictated it to one of her aides. Put out a couple of tweets, which we'll show you now, about what she thought of meeting these so-called Windermere children.
Yeah, there was a series of tweets, but the first one said that it was so powerful to hear how their time in the lakes, enjoying outdoor recreation, sport and art therapy, allowed them to be able to begin to rebuild their lives and eventually their families here in the UK. So again, this is all tied into the work that she has done, and the belief that the outdoors and how it can help young people. But she had actually read about the Windermere children and wanted to. She'd said that she'd like to meet them.
Yeah, there is actually. I was speaking to the Holocaust Education Trust, which is a fantastic charity, and then actually there is a film or a documentary, I forget which I've actually decided that I'm going to watch about the Windermere children. So again, it's something you can Google. I think it might be a BBC film or drama, an adaptation. So definitely worth a watch, and just reminding ourselves, I think, as ever, reminding ourselves of what happened in occupied Europe in the Second World War. She
also met, when she was there, so after they'd taken the boat trip across Lake Windermere, she also then met some relatives of survivors, and those included
Judge Rinder.
Judge Rinder, who you'll know from ITV. He's a sort of a celebrity barrister, but his grandfather was one of the Windermere children who came over after the war.
Yes, Judge Rinder, or Rob Rinder, has a programme on ITV in the afternoon. What's the equivalent? There is an equivalent one in the US, wasn't it? I forget what it was based on. Same judge thing.
It's a good story.
Yeah, good story. Anyway, I'm just trying to be inclusive of our American audience. So Rob Rinder was there. Now, he'd actually just recently made a documentary where he went back to Belarus and found out what happened to some of his family, and that's a very depressing tale, to be frank with you. But he met the Duchess there because, was it his father was on
grandfather,
one of the Windermere children. So there's some pictures, I think, again, if you're watching on YouTube, you will see right now of Kate meeting Rob Rinder.
He was saying actually how impressed he was with, sort of how much the Duchess knew about this and sort of the kind of the conversations that they were having. And we spoke to him afterwards.
They came firstly to convalesce here in this magical place in Cumbria, and they formed a family because they'd lost theirs. They'd been murdered, and they formed the boys, and this group of boys and girls refound life in this part of the world, here in Windermere.
Very shortly, we'll be hearing from one of the producers, or probably the producer, or anyway, someone who was very heavily involved. I'll find out what his title is when we speak to him, with the BBC documentary which went out last night here in the UK, where many members of the royal family spoke about Prince Philip, the programme that started as a tribute to him for his 100th birthday, but then was delayed and recast, I suppose, to reflect on his passing in April. So we'll be speaking to Robert Hardman about that, because I think he did all the interviews, didn't he? With all
a lot of them, I think, bar two. He was saying the other day.
So,
yeah.
But we will be chatting to him. So stay tuned. Keep your podcast churning. There's still plenty more to come, but we thought we'd bring you a little section on the Yorks. Prince Andrew in the court papers. Now, OK, so... right.
The ongoing saga about have they not been
served? Right.
Yeah.
So you know that so Virginia Giuffre, Prince Andrew's accuser, wants to serve the lawsuit on Prince Andrew. Last week we told you about papers being served or not served. Things happening in the High Court, those things being challenged by Prince Andrew's team. I think what we can tell you now, and this is, I suppose, a bit of clarity in this situation, is that finally the papers have been served. They went from Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, David Boies, in New York, to Prince Andrew's lawyer, Andrew Brettler, in California. And because it was going from one American lawyer to another American lawyer within the jurisdiction of the United States, that means a judge was satisfied that papers have now been served on Prince Andrew.
And his team, we understand, are not going to contest it this time. They agree papers have been served. They were emailed and FedExed to Andrew Brettler at his office in Los Angeles. And when we had that court hearing a couple of weeks ago now, we thought that the judge, he made it pretty clear that
there's an easy way to do this.
There's an easy way to do this, and he would accept the papers now. Now somebody was representing Andrew in court. If the papers went to him, he would accept that. And he did say at the time, there was a pretty high degree of certainty that the papers would be served sooner or later, and they have been. They've
been served, which means at some point the clock is going to start ticking in order for Prince Andrew's legal team to make a response. It's also our understanding, by the way, that it is now the US legal team led by Andrew Brettler who is taking over the majority of this case. The London team at Blackford Solicitors are very much still his UK lawyers. There were some reports in the papers he was unhappy with them, but he's retained their services. But in terms of fighting the lawsuit that's been issued against him by Virginia Giuffre, it's Andrew Brettler who is going to take the lead. Yeah, so we know that he's felt frustrated by having to remain silent and not be able to come out and say, to refute the claims. They've very much taken a tactic of remaining quiet, and he has felt frustrated by that. But Blackford's remain, and Brettler will now take the lead. Now, we've also told you in the past few weeks that Prince Andrew is in Balmoral, where he's been staying with the Queen. He was there with his former wife, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, who he still lives with in Windsor when they're there. That's another story, I suppose. But she, Sarah Ferguson, has left Windsor and driven or flown south to see her new baby granddaughter, which was announced on Monday after being born last weekend. Andrew, however, the grandfather of aforementioned baby, stays in Balmoral, at least for the time being.
Yes.
Right.
We should just say while we're on Prince Andrew, before we finish the Andrew section, that he obviously vehemently denies all the allegations.
The legal bit that we don't just have to do, but should do, of course, because it's fact. Prince Andrew denies the allegations and maintains that he never recalls meeting Virginia Giuffre. So he remains in Balmoral. Ex-wife, former wife, is now in... Where does Beatrice live? London, doesn't she, with Edo? They had their baby in the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. Do you want to read out the little statement from
I'll read you the
Palace? And those of you on YouTube can see it on your screen in full.
I'll give you the highlights from it rather than the full statement.
Buckingham Palace-y headed notepaper or whatever it is.
So yeah, Princess Beatrice and Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi had a baby girl at 11:42 p.m. on Saturday. She was born at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and the whole family are said to be delighted. By the whole family, we take that to mean
well, there was a
grandparents,
reference to grandparents, wasn't there, in the statement? Have you got it there? It's just that there was a reference to grandparents, but clearly they didn't go into great detail. They certainly didn't name grandparents, Duke of York, Prince Andrew by name.
But also the Queen, who, as you said earlier, it's a 12th great-grandchild for the Queen. She's got quite a lot of them.
Yes.
It's a lot of birthday cards to remember.
That is a lot of birthday cards to remember. I'm just trying to find the statement from Buckingham Palace where it mentioned...
While you're finding that, I'll just say that both mum and baby are doing well and looking forward to introducing her to big brother Christopher Wolfe, who's known as Wolfie. He's Edo's son from a previous relationship, and Beatrice is stepson now.
I was going to try and find it in my Twitter, but I can't, and I'm just going to stop. Anyway, we made the point. Staying with the Yorks, but talking of babies, we now know actually how you pronounce the name August, which is Princess Beatrice's son, Eugenie's son. Regular viewers and listeners of this podcast will know that I quite often get these two muddled up. So Princess Beatrice just had a baby last weekend, name as yet not released. Princess Eugenie had a baby earlier this year or last year? Can't remember one. Anyway, last year I think, wasn't it?
It was this year, just not long before Prince Philip passed away, because he's August Philip.
Yes, and we heard Eugenie refer to her son as August rather than Auguste or Auguste or
in the documentary.
Yes,
and actually
the documentary. And that's why that was a very tenuous link to being able to talk about the documentary.
There'd been a lot of questions actually about whether August had ever met Prince Philip, and in the documentary she does confirm that she had the chance to introduce them.
So a lot to talk about in this documentary. Who shall we get to talk about the documentary?
Let's have the man who made it.
Let's have the man who made it. Robert, congratulations. We were just having a debate in the studio about what we call you. Were you producer? Were you director? Were you? There was no narration, and all the more powerful for it. What was your role in this?
My role was officially writer, co-producer. I mean, I sort of came up with the idea and did the interviews and helped put it together. But I mean, it was a team effort, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful watch, and we were just saying, well, we're all the more powerful for the fact there wasn't any narration, and it was just the royals talking about the man they knew.
Yeah, I often find with royal documentaries, kind of less is more on the commentary front.
I think, Robert, what was so extraordinary about it was having so many of them together on one programme paying tribute to Prince Philip. Can you just tell us a little bit about the process, how you managed to get them all to agree to doing it?
Yeah, this started out this time last year with the idea of a programme to mark the Duke's 100th. I'd interviewed him several times. He's a fascinating man, and 100 years of the Duke, there was a lot to say. And so I approached the palace. Their view was, well, we'll put it to him. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. Typical Duke of Edinburgh, very modest man, didn't want to blow his own trumpet, but nor was he going to stop other people from talking to us. So we approached members of the family. They were very keen to take part. And obviously at the time, we had the whole issue of COVID lockdown. So we couldn't really do very much until the spring of this year. Then we started doing interviews with the first few members of the family. And then, of course, on April the 9th, the terrible news came through that he died. And so we just thought, well, that's that, and we'll stop. And then after a few weeks, we looked back at what we'd recorded and thought, well, actually, this is important stuff. What the family is saying is in a way, it's even more relevant now. And so we went back to the family and asked them what obviously, did they want to carry on? And the view was very much yes.
So Robert, how did you deal with that? How did you deal with the fact that you sort of pre-recorded a lot of it when he was still alive, and therefore I think if you listened very closely to your documentary, you hear people talk about him in the present tense, and then clearly you'd gone back to some other members, not all of them, after his death.
That we just decided to that was a given. We didn't want to go back and reshoot the interviews we'd already done. Often when people have recently died, people still talk about them in the present tense. Actually, it's quite interesting. And some of the interviews we did after his death, people were still talking about him in the present tense. So it just didn't really matter. You're absolutely right. If you listen closely to the program, you'll hear sometimes is, sometimes was. And we made that clear right at the top of the program, explaining that this was filmed really during the course of his 100th year. I think it sort of adds really. It adds to the sort of depth of the profile. And we didn't want anything. Funereal. We didn't want this to feel like a sort of very mournful black bordered obituary piece. We wanted this to be a celebration.
I think one of the loveliest parts of the documentary is hearing how they all talk about the partnership between the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. Was it ever a possibility that she might in any way take part to pay her own tribute?
Well, it would have been great, but I sort of knew from the outset that the Queen's never given an interview. It's one of her, one of the sort of great aspects of the reign is that she's never sat down, and obviously she's spoken on a few programs over the years, but she doesn't do interviews. So we didn't expect that. I expected it. Quite a lot of members of the family would have something to say. I didn't expect everybody to come on board. They're very busy people, but it's really just a reflection of their huge love and affection for him that everybody wanted to talk.
I mean, there was the conversation, with Prince Bardon. There was also, just moments when the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, was saying how she has kind of tried to learn from him in how to be a consort, because that's obviously a job that's coming her way at some point in the future. And then there was even like Prince Charles's conversation with his dad about the 100th birthday, and he said, well, I've got to be alive in order to celebrate it. There were so many highlights. It's quite hard to pick out my favourites.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with you there. I kind of look back on it and think, well, there's some very funny moments. I mean, there's some real laugh out loud stuff. The story of the mustard joke seems to have gone viral. I dare say if you go to the shops today, you might find that tubes of mustard have sold out, and might be some rather messy ceilings all around the country. But I thought that some of those stories, the story of Prince William telling us about how the day the Duke met the teenagers doing the Duke of Edinburgh's awards scheme, wound down the window of the car and said, "How are you getting on?" And one of them said, as Prince William put it, "Jog on, Grandad," although it was a little ruder than that. So those moments are great. But I absolutely the way that the family were fascinated about his early life in particular and telling us about that. The Duchess of Cornwall said, she'd talked to him about it, and it had been riveting to hear his account of growing up, because it was this extraordinary, very bleak, almost Dickensian sort of upbringing where, the family are sent into exile when he's a baby, and then his parents split up, his sisters all marry and move abroad. And he's just sort of pushed around between cousins and boarding school, and while his mother is confined to a sanatorium. I mean, it's a sort of, it was a tough upbringing. He might have been born royal, but it wasn't an easy life, and that's reflected by his family, and they were all making the point this had sort of shaped him, and I think it explained why he was a very hands-on dad himself. I mean, it was lovely here. Often you get times of mourning, everyone makes very sort of correct, slightly formulaic points. But this felt like, this was coming from the heart.
Yeah, even flying Concorde, and just how surprised his own secretary was by what she found in the logs. Yeah,
and really the first time we've heard from Lady Louise, and it seems so appropriate to have her talking in this because of that joint love they shared of carriage driving.
Lady Louise, yeah, she was absolutely charming. She was one of the, I think, one of the highlights, yet another highlight of the programme, and just takes after him in so many ways. I mean, she was very lovely, recollections, and it was wonderful that she's actually, as we speak, in the middle of doing the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme herself. And as you say, she's sort of taken up the reins, literally, of the carriage driving. She really loved it.
Robert, let me just ask you, I suppose a bit of a sensitive question, but people will want it asked. Did you take any deliberate decisions about whether or not to include the Duke of York, given everything that's going on currently with his situation? Did you include him less because of what's going on? Just can you talk us about, some of the discussions that you must have had as producers?
In making a programme there's an awful lot of decisions, not one all my decisions, but it was a very kind of collegiate approach. But I mean, from the outset, we were very clear that we wanted to include all the family, and clearly the Duke of York's got other issues going on. But we were very clear to everybody in the family, this is just about the Duke. We're not going off script here. We're making a programme. The initial premise was to celebrate 100 years, and I think when we were interviewing the Duke of York, it was before the death of the Duke. So we were looking forward to a 100th birthday. That was all we were going to talk about. So it was important that he was part of it, and we it was difficult trying to work out who to put in where and how much to use. I mean, there were a lot of moving parts and only 1 hour to deal with. But I think everybody's. I hope everybody feels that they've said their piece.
I know exactly what you mean. When you've got an hour of television, it feels like a lot. But when you've got so much content, and I've had this problem before when you're making these things, it's just there's so much to squeeze in, and it doesn't feel like that long in the end, does it? An hour.
No, it doesn't. And there are certain things you have to include various bits of archive as well to sort of explain various moments. I mean, we at one point, we had quite a lot of the coronation, and we thought, well, everybody knows about the coronation. That's going to take up too much time. I mean, the coronation, I think, was reduced to a couple of seconds because there was so much to get in. I'm sure we could have got more members of the family, and we as I said, we decided we would talk to the children and their spouses and the grandchildren, because that would be more, that in itself left us with masses of material. Yeah. So we didn't then want to kind of go on and interview other cousins and grandchildren's spouses and all the rest. People have asked, well, why where was the Duchess of Cambridge, where was the Duchess of Sussex, where was Mike Tyndall? It would have been lovely to talk to all of them, but then you would have been sort of really, some people might have ended up on the cutting room floor, and you just absolutely don't want to do that on a programme like this. You want to make sure everybody everybody's contribution is valued and plays its part.
We recognise, because we did an interview with Princess Royal not long after the Duke of Edinburgh's death in Gatcombe Park, in that barn, upstairs in the barn. It looked like you did some interviews in there as well, because we were, I recognised
that. Yeah.
It wasn't a very palatial backdrop. No, it was a barn. That's where I was doing a birthday documentary on Princess Royal last year for her 70th, and because of COVID rules, we weren't allowed to do it indoors, so we actually ended up doing it in a field. And if you listen closely to that one, start hearing mooing, because we were joined by some cows in the middle of an interview. That was an interesting challenge.
Well, it was a great watch as well, and good to see more of Princess Anne, which she obviously doesn't always get that much attention. Listen, congratulations. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure many millions of people did who watched it last night as well. So good work, well done, and thanks for chatting about it with us.
Thanks, Robert. Both.
So our thanks to Robert Hardman. I mean, what an amazing little project to work on. I mean, It's not often you get to speak to son, daughter, grandchildren. You know, you get to do all that sort of filming. I also thought the stuff in the office with his one of his secretaries was just really
fascinating. It was just a fascinating insight into Prince Philip from the people that knew him best. I thought it was a really lovely watch.
Yes, so well done to Robert and his team at the BBC who produced that. We can, for once, tell you a couple of things that are happening or coming up, which normally we we can't. Whatever. It's been a long week. So do you want to tell us what's happening next week? One involves James Bond and one involves Paris.
So James Bond, this is quite exciting. We've got the Royals out in force for the new James Bond film premiere, which will be held it's the world premiere, and it'll be held at the Royal Albert Hall next Tuesday. And Charles, Camilla, Kate and William will all be there for that. No Time to Die.
And Dame Judi Dench, the aforementioned Dame Judi Dench, who played M in a number of James Bonds before dying in one of them. The last one she died in, or the one before? Can't remember.
Oof.
Anyway, she's going as well, because I asked her and she said yes, she is. So just to let you know, just a bit of bit of showbiz.
Bit of showbiz, that'll be a good glitzy one, won't it?
Kind of hang out with these days. Anyway, so that's happening at the Royal Albert Hall, and Princess Royal, the aforementioned Princess Royal, who went to the Chelsea's Flower Show earlier this week with her husband.
I'm not going to hear the end of this. I am not going to hear the end of this.
Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, who was there in my phone, proof. Anyway, what's the news on Princess Anne?
She's going abroad. The return of foreign travel.
She
is going to Paris for the 3rd and 4th of October, and it's in her role as a member of the International Olympic Committee and patron of Scottish Rugby Union, and she'll be meeting representatives from the Olympics and Paralympics of the Games in 2024, which will be held in France, and also the Rugby World Cup, which will be held there in 2023.
Right, we're done. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with us while we had a gallop through what is yet another busy week in Royal Land. As you know, regular viewers and listeners will know we do this every week, so we'll be back next week. Same kind of place, same kind of time, same kind of subject matter, really. Royals.
As the name would suggest, it would be a bit weird if we started talking about something else.
There you go.
See you next week.
Bye.